Really sorry. We were late to our own live that we organised. 2 weeks ago, we organised this and we are 10 minutes late.
Apologies.
Very
Got
sorry.
people joining now. We'll be waiting for a few more people to connect.
Your face isn't even on this one.
We'll be waiting for people to connect before we start continuing with any questions.
Once again, really sorry we're late to our own live. We had some technical difficulties, bad signal, and the laptop just wouldn't connect. So in future, we need to be earlier. We were actually in here half an hour ago. But hello, welcome everyone. Hello. So the idea of today really is, if you've not met us before or you've not spoken to us over the phone, my name's Alice. This is
Tyler.
And we head up the anaesthetics and critical care desk here at BDI Resourcing. So we help doctors relocate from all over the world. We do specifically just speak with anaesthetists and intensivists, but we are here to answer your questions. Any questions at all about your situation, whether you're going through your GMC, whether you're going through your general relocation, or you've not yet started thinking about your relocation, whatever stage of the process that you're in, hopefully we can help you. So the idea of today is for us to just sit and listen, really, and be your agony aunt.
Yes, essentially.
So we have had a few questions already on Instagram. So we're going to start with those, but just comment below and hopefully we will get around to answering all of you. So Dr. Kumar asked on Instagram, I'm looking at coming to the UK. I've not had I've made any steps towards my GMC registration, but I'm looking at the MTI scheme. Is this a good route for me? Do you want to answer that one?
Can do, yeah. So we get asked this one quite a lot. As a company and as a team that help the NHS with clinical service roles, it's not something that we can tangibly help with. It is something that we can advise on and sort of point you in the right direction. Because we are helping trusts with clinical service roles, the MTI scheme is obviously the Medical Training Initiative, which is a sort of, used to be called sort of like a learn and return scheme. So essentially the idea is that you come over to the NHS, you gain usually about 2 years of experience, and take that sort of experience back with you to your original trust, and bring the skills back there and help other people learn from you, essentially. Because of that, it is sort of like a temporary post, and the clinical service roles that we help with are long-term and sort of permanent posts. So it is something that you can look into. I would specifically advise it for that reason, though. If you are looking to stay in the UK long-term, and you're looking to settle down here or bring your family over, then I would probably look at going through the GMC registration and getting a long-term, or if permanent post. But yeah, I mean, feel free to sort of reach out and ask us for help on that. We do sort of guide a lot of people through it, but yeah.
And with the MTI scheme as well, although you're not really able to use an agency for it, you can go onto the Royal College website. So for anaesthetics, you go onto the FRCA website and they've got a page called Pairing Scheme. What you can do is you can register on there with your details and your CV, providing you've got proof of your MBBS and either OET or IELTS. You can sign up for that, outline your preferred areas in the UK, and the Royal College would notify you of any MTI positions that do come up. So definitely worth doing, and there is different pairing schemes for different specialties as well. That's not just anaesthetics.
Yep.
I'm really scared to actually touch this one because we've got the camera on a stand and it's a bit wobbly. But Dr. Soheb Khan.
I think that's the first one.
Sorry,
there,
I've just skipped
it's
it.
like a request to give info regarding Caesar pathway.
Caesar.
Yeah, so this is a big one. Quite a broad question, so I'm not sure what specific information you're looking for there. I suspect you've probably heard that the way that they grade and mark the portfolios that you submit now in your application has been changed. Our rule of thumb for guidance on this is not to approach the process any differently. Treat it the same as you would if you were, building your Caesar portfolio, 6 months ago or a year ago. It's still obviously a lengthy process. The idea is not so much to make it easier, but to be able to take into account experience more flexibly, rather than it being quite sort of rigid. And I guess in sense it's made it a little bit easier, but it hasn't actually changed the way you go about it. You still have to get the experience and submit it and provide evidence. It just means that the evidence that you need to provide now can be sort of taken into account a little bit more leniently and flexibly. So it does help people that are sort of providing evidence from different healthcare systems, which is often all of the doctors, a lot of them. So, I mean, in terms of the updates for now, that would be it. Our sort of advice at the moment would be to just keep up to date with the curriculums for whatever specialty you're in. Can be quite lengthy, so just have a look every time they're updated. Look through those and take a look at what needs to be done for your Caesar, and aim to tackle them off and tick them off one by one.
I think Caesar's such a big topic. There's so much going on. Like you say, as well, one thing that I really like the change to is before there was specifically timings, like you had to do a certain amount of months in cardiac and paediatrics. Now they've kind of scrapped that, and it is more about your knowledge, your skills, and your evidence, your expertise in each area, rather than being able to just do a specific amount of time. So they're a little bit more, I wouldn't say lenient,
flexible.
Flexible is the right word.
Probably the best word.
But the best thing to do is download the guidance. That's the best place to start on the GMC website. Create a plan for yourself, because there is not one way to do Caesar. There are so many different routes that you can take. Some people may hear of Caesar and it's quite easy to think that you must get a Caesar fellowship to complete Caesar. And actually, we help consultants every year complete their Caesar and help them plan out how they're going to best complete the competencies that they've got left. And often that might look like doing a year at one trust, doing a general role, maybe focusing on things like audit and teaching, maybe using a fellowship that they've done overseas for something like cardiothoracic or neuro. Actually, that's a really good kind of tip to do if you're struggling to get the cardiothoracic and the neuro in the UK, because they are quite niche areas. They are going to be the more tricky areas to get documents for or evidence for. If you've got any documentation or proof of fellowships or recent experience overseas, you can use that. Bring it with you. And use that when you come around to applying for your Caesar. There's so many different routes. There's so much we could talk about. We could probably do an hour on Caesar. But if you do have any questions, we are always more than happy to answer them specific. So just pop us a message on Facebook or our emails. We will comment to any comments that we haven't gone back to, by the way, on this live. So if you have any specific situations or Caesar questions, we will get back to you.
We've got one from here for you from Habiba Al-Baga. I hope I've pronounced that correctly.
Hello.
My husband's EDAKE 2 exam is next December and he has OET previously, but the OET will pass 2 years next January. So any hint for GMC registration with OET more than 2 years? Do you want to take that one?
I wish I had better news. Unfortunately, OET and IELTS, they have 2-year validity. And so it's so important when you're starting out your GMC process that you figure out when's the best time to take it. Because I've seen a lot of doctors in this chat where they start their FRCA and they take OET at the beginning, but because FRCA is so lengthy, by the time you get to the end of it, it's expired. So save yourself a little bit of money, save yourself the time and try and plan accordingly. But unfortunately, in that situation, you would have to retake either OET or IELTS.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's not better news.
Next one. Anaz Al-Belazi. I have 5 years experience working in ICU. I have an upcoming interview for, I think that's Caesar pathway rotation.
Oh.
How should I be prepared for that and what should I know about?
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations on the interview to start with. I think there's two sides to that. I would say obviously the interview itself for the role. So first of all, do your research on the role, read through the job description, make sure you're aware of what you're applying for first and foremost. sort of research into the hospital, for sure. Even the location of where the hospital is as well. It's good to know about where you're moving to if you would be relocating. I take it that's probably the case. The second part would be the research into the CSER side of things. So if you are going for a CSER fellowship, although the fellowships are fairly sort of comprehensive, and I suspect it will be one of the larger trusts, with I guessing multiple sites that are covering a lot of different subspecialties, they will still want you to know, what you need to do for CSER. So a good way of doing that is look at your past experience. Everyone's got sort of like a different background or sort of path that they've taken to get where they are at the moment. So take a look through your past experiences before. I assume you're relocating from overseas. Before you move over to the UK, I would say gather all of the evidence that you can from the hospitals that you've worked at overseas, whatever countries they are. I would gather them now before you relocate to the UK, because it will be much easier to do that while you're there rather than come over to the UK and then have to reach back out to previous hospitals that you may have worked at years ago to get some certificates or logbooks and things like that. So yeah, my advice would be to gather everything that you need over there. Research into CSER, take a look at the curriculum, have a look at what you need to do. Obviously with the CSER fellowship they will support you with things, but it is in general a very individually driven sort of task to complete. It's not something that the trust will be able to do for you, it's something that they will be able to facilitate for you. So yeah, just make sure you're sort of in the know and researched everything that you can about the job, the area, the role and CSER. Furthermore, if you want to reach out to us, we do have like a interview preparations guide as well, which is very general. It will cover all trusts for all grades within anaesthetics and ICU at least. Yeah, we're happy to give that out. I think you can download it on the website, so feel free to take a look on there and just give that a download and have a little read through it.
I'm really sorry if our sound is breaking up on Facebook. We had a last minute change of technology. I can see a few comments saying that they can't hear us. If you can hear us on Facebook, please do comment to let us know. Otherwise, what we might have to do is log off and log back in off another device. So please just comment on Facebook if you're watching, if you can hear us. I can see a few comments, but so sorry.
Yeah,
we came prepared.
Give us a shout if there's any.
The only other thing I can add for the interview, what to prepare for your interview is just because it's a CSER fellowship, it's still going to follow the same format as a normal interview. There's probably going to be a few more probing questions about why CSER and where you are with your CSER, but do just generally prepare as you would a normal interview. So kind of prepare yourself for a couple of clinical scenarios. And the other thing is to go in prepared with a couple of questions. Always have at least 2, I would say maximum 3. I know that's very precise, but if you just ask 1, you might come across as uninterested. If you ask too many, the consultants, the panel might be thinking, oh, we're in a bit of a rush. So you want to leave it short but sweet and show that you're interested. So I think 2 or 3 questions, would you agree? 2 or 3?
Yeah, 2 or 3. I think the rule of thumb would be to essentially any questions that would influence your decision on whether you think it would be a good post for you to join or not. They're the questions to get out. May need to do with the clinical side of things.
I'll tell you what though, questions to avoid.
Yes, that's a good
questions to avoid in an NHS interview. Number 1. Salary. What is the salary? Do not ask about salary. That's my best advice. Save it for after the interview. Ideally, when you go into an interview, you will roughly have an idea of what to expect. But save any questions about salary, about contract length, I would say. Anything else?
Yeah, I'd say any of the contractual sort of information or details that's held by HR, like relocation policies.
Accommodation.
Those things, accommodation, relocation packages, salary, contract length, all of these things. Maybe the length of term can be discussed with the clinicians depending on,
the situation.
Whether they're looking for a short-term cover or whether you're looking for a permanent role, that could be brought up. But the details for salary, relocation package, anything that's discussed with HR, leave those questions for after the interview has been handed over to the HR sort of people involved. The reason we say that is the clinical leads and the clinical directors and the consultants that are interviewing you are obviously there to assess your clinical capabilities and how you would fit as a person into the department. It's not so much to discuss or negotiate offers. It's to see whether there would be whether it would get to that stage. So yeah, that would be our sort of rule of thumb on what to and what not to ask in the interviews. Yeah, I think just going back there to Anas, if you've got some specific questions to a situation you're in at the moment, please reach out to one of us after the live, and we'd be more than happy to give you some more specific feedback to where you are at the moment. I understand you asked about being stalled in the UK and all of your experience was in your home country. Yeah.
I think we're glitching on Facebook. So with Facebook, we're actually going to log off this phone and we're going to log back in on a different one.
Right.
So bear with us, Facebook. I'm
will be
so
back.
sorry. We're coming back to answer your questions. With Instagram, yeah, we'll just continue with Instagram. Really sorry. Hopefully everyone on Instagram can hear us and see us okay. So in terms of interviews, interview preparation, like we say, we do have a really useful document with all of our kind of top tips. Questions, like we say, are really important. We've kind of outlined what not to ask, but I would definitely highlight things. I think highlighting a few things that they should ask is a good idea as well. So examples of questions to ask in an NHS interview. I think we're just going to log in on my phone.
Oh, okay. No worries.
So ideas for questions to ask in an NHS interview that I think will give off a good impression. Anything to do with the clinical work. So for example, if it's an anaesthetic or any job actually, a very generic one is what would my induction period look like? Or what would my first 4 to 6 weeks in the NHS look like?
Yeah, questions about the rota, the clinical requirements, like the support, the induction to the role. Anything to do with the sort of like, the hands-on work, the split of the rota, what's required of you, how the team's sort of set out, how are the shifts sort of set throughout the week.
Yeah.
Anything to do with the role itself. They're the most important ones. It shows that you're interested to know about the actual job that you'll be doing, and it just it will instill a little bit of faith into the clinicians interviewing you that you're seriously considering the role and you're actually thinking about all aspects.
And I think any particular interest that you have outside of your clinical duties, so if you have any interest like teaching, like audit, cardiothoracic, if that's something that you're interested in, anything at all, if it's a specific subspecialty or if it's something extracurricular that you'd like to explore, definitely bring it to the table. This is your time to tell them about your interests, and you could say, would there be an option to get involved with teaching, with audit, with those extracurricular areas. And I think that departments are always on the lookout for people that have those sort of interests that can bring something as well as clinical duties to the role. I'm just going to let you continue with the questions whilst I get...
Yeah, sorry guys. I can see a couple of people have switched over from Facebook to Instagram. We are coming back up on Facebook any second now. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
We've actually had this arranged for... I know I've said this, but we've had this arranged for 2 weeks in the diary, and then the day of we just can't figure it out. So I'm so sorry.
Someone asked about the length of process to get a job in the NHS at the moment. It's hard to say, really. I think it's almost... Sorry about that. It's almost like asking how long's a piece of string, really. It can be different for every individual, regardless of what role they're applying for, or what grade, what areas in the country. It's completely down to what centres are recruiting, what centres have vacancies, the criteria that they're looking for. There's so many variables. It's extremely hard to, put a timeline on anything. It can range and vary anywhere from people getting a position and an interview and an offer within a couple of weeks. Some other people, unfortunately, it takes months and months and months. And yeah, it's not really a question we can actually give an answer to, I'm afraid.
It's really tricky. By the way, welcome back everyone that's watching on Facebook. We are back, and I'm hoping that the signal is a lot better and that you can hear me. Please let us know if you can't hear us. Please comment your questions and we will get back to you. Any questions at all about relocation or GMC or anything that comes to mind, we're happy to help. And I've actually just forgotten, I don't think that's going to work. We're playing around again. Oh dear, no.
Will that not work?
Oh. No.
There we go.
Oh dear.
Sorry guys. I see.
Please stop playing.
There we go.
So what was the question you were even saying? About the length of time that it takes to get a job. One more thing I was going to add is the other day I literally had a doctor reach out to me. They said they were looking for a middle grade job in intensive care medicine. We submitted them to a job literally that same day to a client, and they got requested to interview the next day. That moved so fast, and I think it was quite overwhelming for that doctor to receive an offer within 48 hours of submitting their CV to us. And then we have other doctors that we might be working with, for a matter of weeks, and we don't quite get the CV feedback that we're hoping for. That does not mean that that person's CV is any better or worse. It's just luck. I honestly think it is luck. The market is continually changing. And don't get disheartened if you've been looking for a job for 6 months. It's honestly normal, and something will come up. I firmly believe that, at any time there is always different jobs being created. Every day new jobs go live on NHS jobs. So just keep looking, really. And like you say, there's no particular timeline on it. You might be able to get a job in a week. It might be a matter of months.
It's one of those ones where obviously a lot of people have friends applying, or friends that have already secured positions, and they're experiencing very different sort of situations to what their friend experienced. And I'd go out as far as go out on a limb and go as far as saying that even two people with identical sort of clinical backgrounds may have a completely different sort of process into the NHS. Simply because maybe one's looking for a position in the north of England and somebody else looking for a position in the south of England, and depending on which hospitals have vacancies at the time, it's not always going to be the same for either of them. It doesn't make one doctor better or more experienced or more suitable. It's simply just down to so many variables that it's really, really hard to sort of predict.
I think we just unintentionally answered Glenn's question from Instagram. He actually said, how common are intensive care SHO jobs anywhere in the UK now? How is it that we are... So, I mean, in answer to that question, it's really tricky, isn't it? To just say, right now, there's this many jobs. Can you answer that question?
No, I don't think anyone could. I think the positions are out there. Obviously you can look on NHS jobs and track jobs, and that tells a little bit of a story. It's not always 100% accurate because of funding, and it depends when hospitals have people lined up for the role internally. If they have people lined up, they still have to put an advert out, so it doesn't actually mean that there's a legitimate vacancy there, because they may have somebody internally lined up for that role. So it doesn't paint the full picture. But I would say generally SHO roles are out there. I would say they're probably a little bit more competitive. Definitely. Since that there's a lot more doctors at that level applying for those roles. So I think it's just the roles are coming up. They're probably getting quite a lot of applicants, filling them quite quickly, and then another one pops up. So I mean, there will be positions out there, and it can be a bit of a tedious task to keep on the job hunt for weeks and months on end. but it's sort of I guess a matter of time thing, while still applying sort of effort to get out there and look for the roles.
And a continuation, how is it that BDI can directly involve in finding a job like we just described? How would we go about it? I think this is so important. I think it's so important for anyone watching, anyone listening, or just any international medical graduate to know why you should use an agency or what we can do differently. Because I appreciate you can reach out on NHS jobs and you can go on to track jobs, and that's what we would always recommend, having a look at what's out there. And I think that's the obvious and logical thing to do, to apply to what you see. What we do very differently is we work with every single UK trust, Scotland, Northern Ireland, every NHS trust we work with. So we have relationships with every clinical director, lead consultant and manager in every intensive care unit and anaesthetic unit. And the same goes for our other teams. We have a medicine division, an AD division, an oncology division. And so what we do is at least once a month we will check in with every single hospital in the UK. It's a lot of work. And we touch base with them how their rotas are looking now, how they're looking in February, have they had any advertisements and failed recently. And sometimes hospitals will have vacancies that they've not put live on NHS jobs. They're not going to go out to advert for, and there's a variety of reasons why a hospital wouldn't do that. Maybe they think that they're not going to get what they want, maybe they've already tried to get what they want and they haven't been able to, or maybe they're on a tight time schedule. We've got a lot of trusts at the moment that are looking for doctors to come into place February, March time, and that's just around the corner, so they're not going to advertise for that because it's just too soon. What we're able to do is to speak with doctors like yourselves who are already applying on NHS jobs and track jobs and push your CV towards those departments. Make you aware, basically, of positions that you wouldn't find on NHS jobs and track jobs. And I think the other benefit as well of using us is we're often contacted by people that need or want to go to somewhere maybe specific in the UK for whatever reason. Sometimes we work with husband-wife duos. There's a lot of personal kind of circumstances where I think using an agency like BDI Resourcing is makes it a lot smoother, a lot better. And the other thing I would say as well is we do help an awful lot with relocation support. So when you're looking at things like visas and coming to the UK for the first time, it is a really scary process. And so we're here to help you, and we can support you in any way that you need between getting your job and coming to the UK. So lots of perks of getting in touch with us. And yeah, there's no fee. You're not going to be charged to speak with us. We do this day in and day out, and we are just happy to give away any advice that you want. So I don't know. I feel like that answers the question.
I think so.
I've got an essay here on Facebook to read to you.
Yes.
Are you ready?
Go for it.
So, Dr. Khan, Vashkar Khan. I've recently cleared E-Date Part 2, congratulations. Planning for OET. Currently I've been working in ICU, but I have formal 2 years training in anaesthetics, and I want to build my career in anaesthetics in the UK, not in ICU. So do you think it's imperative to have anaesthesia working experience prior to land in an anaesthesia job in the NHS?
I would... Okay, so there's a few things to unpack here. Without sort of speaking with you directly and taking a look at your CV, my sort of general feedback on that immediately would be it would probably help or it'd give you a little bit of a step up if you were already working in anaesthesia right now while you were applying for an anaesthesia role. That being said, I don't think it sort of categorically rules you out of securing an anaesthesia role. Again, it would come down to how long ago was your anaesthesia training. Were you training like last year, or were you training maybe 6 years ago? That will make a bit of a difference. Obviously, if they're looking at CVs, obviously they're going to be looking at people with recent experience that's going to match up with what they're looking for. So the more recent your anaesthesia experience, probably the better. But I wouldn't say it's impossible. It's hard to really give a much more detailed answer than that without looking at your CV or speaking with you. If it's possible, maybe even in the same hospital that you're working, if you could swap over into a role that was primarily anaesthesia, that would probably help when you're speaking with the anaesthetists during an interview. so that you can explain to them that your current sort of clinical requirements are in line with what they would be appointing you for in their position. But yeah, it's not completely out of the question. Anaesthetics and intensive care in the NHS are quite closely interlinked.
Yeah.
You'll probably find in a lot, if not most, ICU departments, the intensive care doctors are trained in anaesthesia. And I mean, that's a whole other conversation, but that's why it can be tricky sometimes for medicine trained intensivists overseas to get into an ICU department, because they require a lot of the departments require anaesthetic trained intensivists. But that's a story for another day, unless anyone asks.
I think we do see a lot of doctors actually come to the NHS, maybe start in a specialty that wasn't their first choice, believe it or not, and then they'll contact us maybe after 6 to 12 months and go, I've done my time, but I want to move back to, for example, anaesthetics. We had a gentleman the other day, where was he working? In London somewhere, and he wanted to relocate anywhere, but he wanted to get out of ICU and move into anaesthetics. And so I think it's a lot easier to do that, Jonna, when once you've got NHS experience. Once you've got, he's leaving me. So once you have a little bit of NHS experience under your belt, I think it's a lot easier to move specialty. So my best advice for that situation, if you're in ICU and you want to move to anaesthetics, is maybe consider a job where you do ICU and anaesthetics. So rather than jumping from a pure ICU role to a pure anaesthetics job, maybe look at jobs where you could do anaesthetics with a bit of ICU, if that makes sense. So go for the mix first before you just jump from one to the other. I think that's the best way. We've recently done it as well with a doctor that was in emergency medicine and wanted to move to ICU, and I think that was quite an easy switch, to be honest, because they do correlate. Hopefully that answers your question, and he's back. We've got another question here. Can we apply for CSER from outside of the UK? Do you want the short answer or the long answer? Do you want to give the short or the long one? Which one do you want to give?
You can crack on. You carry on.
For the short or the long?
Yeah.
It's possible. It is possible. But I would say it would be very, very difficult to... CSER is such a difficult and lengthy process. It really does need to be thought out. It's not something that a lot of doctors are successful with. And so when you're looking at CSER versus training, I think you need to look at the time periods, because CSER is not a quick application. It probably takes, I'd say, 4 or 5 years, sometimes longer, which sounds silly, really, because the CSER documentation usually has to be within 5 or 7 years anyway. So you can technically apply from outside the UK, especially if you've worked in the UK previously, or you've worked in a country like Singapore or Sri Lanka where the healthcare systems are mirrored. That said, I think that things like NHS references, things like NHS audit, they are imperative to a CSER application. So yes, you can apply, but to be honest, if you want a successful CSER application and you want to do it right first time, my best advice is, if you are overseas, make a plan. If CSER is the route that you want to go for, make a clear plan of how you're going to get through your CSER, and that could be maybe tackling some of the more difficult subspecialties overseas where you are, where they're more maybe accessible, things like cardiothoracic, like neuro, like paediatrics. Once you've got as much documentation as possible, make a plan about what subspecialties or what exposure elements are you going to do first within the NHS, and tackle those first, and just work your way through CSER. But CSER is not something that a hospital can give to you either. I think that's something we get a lot. Can I get a job in a hospital where they're going to give me my CSER? And
no is the short answer.
No.
They can help and they can facilitate and they can support. But that is, again, it has to be discussed in terms of, when someone says they can support with CSER, what does that mean? That's the real sort of the devil's in the details, basically.
Yeah.
A hospital can support with CSER for sure, but if they don't have all the subspecialties and maybe their exposure is limited, they can support, but what they can support you with isn't much, and it's not going to, provide you much, many advantages in signing off and in completing your CSER portfolio. So there has to be a little bit of sort of insight into what they can help you with and what they can do. But generally, it's basically opening the doors. You still have to, go and do the work and gather the experience. We've got an interesting question here on Instagram. Anaesthetics vacancies in the coming years, will they increase or will they remain the same? According to the most recent workforce consensus, depending on which way you look at it, for doctors looking to secure jobs, fortunately there will be, we expect many more vacancies. For the hospitals themselves, unfortunately, yes, there will be growing vacancies within the departments at all levels. Specifically at sort of consultant level is an area where statistically, if you're looking at the past few years, 5 to 10 years, the gaps at consultant level are increasing every year, and I think we've recently put out some information from the workforce consensus highlighting the sort of drastic increase that will be, sort of calculated roughly within the next few years, and yes, there is going to be growing vacancies across all grades. Yeah.
They're always changing, so yeah, keep an eye out. I do think this time of year, specifically for anaesthetics, you would tend to see an increase in like February time, because that's when new rotas are released for trainees. Often hospitals will find they don't have enough trainees, UK trainees, coming through the system. So in February, that's when you'll see a lot of adverts go out. So that's what I suspect.
February, April as well is when a lot of adverts go out, you'll find. That's when they get their budget back. And also August rotations. So there tends to be a few, sort of ups and downs throughout the year in terms of like if you're looking at how many vacancies on NHS jobs at least. But I mean, there's never a point in any year where there's not.
Well, they just stop.
Vacancies.
Yeah, they will always be vacancies.
So I mean, there's now is as good a time as any for individuals looking to secure a post. So Vikas Savadi, is it possible to get a consultant post with EDAKE and 10 years of anaesthetics experience? I mean, it's hard to say just off of that. My initial feedback given the conversations we're having with most trusts and departments, specifically clinical directors and clinical leads at the moment, their criteria is a little bit higher than that. They're probably expecting FRCA is a big qualification. A lot of departments will only appoint consultants in anaesthesia now if they hold full FRCA. UK experience working in the NHS, doesn't have to be at consultant level, can be specialty doctor, or potentially senior clinical fellow, but again, that along with FRCA will then increase your chances again. Anything other than that would be sort of specialist registration, which obviously is sort of that's the ideal, but that's not always the case. There simply aren't enough specialist registered consultants in the country to fill all the positions anyway. So I would say, Vikas, I would say potentially in some departments that might be feasible. Maybe in more rural places, smaller departments where the sort of clinical pressures aren't as heavy. But for a lot of places in the city, I can tell you now in London, for example, it wouldn't be enough. Maybe other cities like Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, it would be the same. They wouldn't be looking at anyone without FRCA, NHS experience, and essentially quite close to either going through CSER or at least quite close to applying. Unfortunately, I would say, or not so much unfortunately, I think it's probably a good place to start really. Middle grade roles such as specialty doctor, senior clinical fellow especially, Sometimes even specialists, they're not as common. So I wouldn't hold much hopes on that. But senior clinical fellow, specialty doctor, they're good positions to get into the NHS and actually have an ample amount of room to move forward with CSER. If you come into the NHS, frankly, if you start in the NHS as a locum consultant, it's going to be extremely hard, if it isn't hard already, in getting any sort of assistance, support, or even really any time to move forward and progress with your CSER portfolio. So I mean, it depends if it's a short-term or long-term sort of thing, but yeah, I think for now, Vickers, it might be quite tricky to get a consultant position. Yeah.
Dr. Shawkat Mahmood on Facebook. Is it difficult to find a job in we're both squinting. To find a job in anaesthesia if anyone leaves the NHS and then wants to come back? Great question, and actually we see it an awful lot where doctors maybe trained in the UK 20 years back, or I know certain healthcare systems like the Sri Lankan healthcare system, to get Sri Lankan board certification, which is their equivalent for specialist registration, they are required to do 2 years in kind of a foreign kind of country. NHS classifies as that. So a lot of doctors, we see consultants from Sri Lanka a lot who have worked in the NHS previously, decided to go back to Sri Lanka and then have wanted to come back again. That's a situation where it's certainly not difficult. I'd say that once you have NHS experience on your CV, you are just much more employable. You're much more attractive to NHS employers, especially at the senior levels. You know, when we're looking at consultant jobs these days and specialist jobs, the sort of doctors that trusts are expecting to see, they will have their previous NHS experience. So
just to shed a bit of light on that as well, there is a reason why they request that. The more often than not, the reason why they request people with previous NHS experience, whether it's at the same grade or lower, is not so much for anything to do with like being in the UK or swapping over quicker or getting into the post quicker, because it's a 3-month notice pretty much universally. It's predominantly down to the provision of like an induction and a support system when you first start the post. As a locum consultant, even as a locum consultant, you will be working in the same capacity as the substantive consultant. So you will be required to come into the department essentially from week 1 and be a leader, leading that team, leading that department when you're on your consultant shifts. So they are looking for people to come in, usually at the senior posts. That's why it's more commonly required for sort of specialists and consultants to have UK experience. But they're looking for people to come in and immediately fill a senior role in the department. So anyone that sort of that doesn't have NHS experience, from the past sort of, I guess 5-6 years, up to the past sort of like, I would say 5-6 years is where the international recruitment has sort of really sort of grew quite substantially. A lot of trusts have experienced that, even very sort of clinically, senior clinically experienced doctors overseas, there is still a transition period where you have to get used to a new healthcare system. It's nothing to do with like your clinical capabilities or your clinical skills. It will be just down to coming into a new healthcare system, settling in with a department, and also having to be a leader and a senior member of the team all at the same time. It can be a lot of pressure. Very few people can do it, and it's very, very risky for the departments to, if they're already struggling with having a gap on the rota, to appoint someone in a position where they might not be able to fulfil the duties that they need them to fulfil, and if they have to then provide further support, they're stretching the rota more than what it was before they had somebody vacant there. So that just to obviously provide you guys with a bit of insight as to why these hospitals are asking for these bits of criteria and why some hospitals don't. Hopefully that sort of puts your mind at ease a little bit.
I think when you're coming from overseas, and we do get a lot of doctors in a similar situation to the gentleman earlier who've got that EDAIC, maybe they've got 10 years of experience and they want a consultant job. You really need to make a list of your priorities, like why it is that you're coming to the UK, because what you don't want to find happening is that you secure a consultant job, but then you want to work through your CSER. Because when you enter into the NHS as a consultant, you're actually responsible for people that are going through their CSER. So you are the one that are going to be having to write the references and sign more junior doctors off for their CSER. There isn't going to be anyone above you to be referencing your CSER portfolio. And so, you know, if you're planning on staying in the UK long term, getting onto the specialist register, going through CSER, then personally, I wouldn't recommend starting as a consultant anyway. I'd be looking at those senior clinical fellows, specialty doctors. You've kind of got to take a step down to step up in the future. But any specific advice like that, anything at all about your scenarios, specific kind of personal scenarios or qualifications or CV, there's been a few questions today where it would have been beneficial to have a look over your CV. Yeah. We do that totally for free. You know, there's no kind of commitment on your side. Send us your CV, we'll read over it. If there's any improvements that need to be made, we're more than happy to suggest them to you and write it out in an email. And if you want us to start the job search for you alongside yourself making those applications, we're more than happy to do that. Or if you just want Anata on the phone to talk about your options, again, we're more than happy to do that. I'm very conscious, we've been live for about an hour. I need a drink.
Yes. We'll tie this up shortly. I think there's possibly a few more questions. Glenn, what's the best way to have a discussion with BDI, resourcing, team for help? I mean, you can reach out to either of us online. If you go on our website, all of our contact details are on there. You can email us, or I think it's got our direct numbers there. You can just give us a call. We're more than happy to help out.
Or our emails, apply@bdiresourcing.com, or tyler@bdiresourcing.com, or alice@bdiresourcing.com. So yeah, pop us an email and we'd be happy to have a chat.
Stephen, does BDI help with GMC registration? I mean, we can help you in terms of like some guidance and helping you sort of, you know, go through the process. With GMC registration, obviously, unfortunately, I cannot help out with actually doing the language exam. And to be honest, you would be doing much better than me at any medical degree, so you're probably better off doing that one. But I'm happy to offer advice and guidance through the process if that's what you're looking for.
For GMC registration, I think the three main things routes you have the MTI scheme. That isn't something we can help with at all. We can send you advice on how to apply, but it's not something that we can touch. You will need your OET or your IELTS. Route number 2 is the PLAB examinations. To be honest with you, because we're anaesthetics and ICU, and because of the market specifically in anaesthetics, it is quite competitive. We would usually recommend the third option, which is an approved postgraduate qualification. You can find a full list on the GMC website, but for anaesthetics, I'm thinking FRCA primary, EDAIC, what else? MD Sri Lanka.
MD Sri Lanka, yeah, they've
They've
cut the list quite short nowadays.
Is that it for anaesthetic?
There's probably a few more.
I think we're forgetting some.
They're the ones that we know quite commonly. They're the ones that, you know, commonly we work
and
with.
then intensive care, you got your EDIC.
European Diploma of Intensive Care.
MRCP.
MRCP's a big one.
I've seen MRChem before.
MRChem can be used as well.
I've seen that.
Yeah. They're the most common ones.
But there are other qualifications that you like. I see a lot of IDCCM. That's fantastic to have. Unfortunately, you can't use it for your GMC though. But definitely a good qualification to have. Those are your 3 options, and we are happy to advise further on that.
What's this one?
I reckon we can do one more question.
Yeah, I think we've a couple of minutes. One more question from Rahavi. Post anaesthesia, what are the probability of getting a job in the UK without EDAIC or FRCA? So yeah, it can be done. I will be honest, when clinical leads are looking through CVs, they obviously will look at somebody with FRCA and then EDAKE in a sort of an order of priority, just as what's sort of most impressive or something that stands out. They will typically first look at doctors with FRCA, even FRCA primary can sort of help towards
Fantastic qualifications.
Yeah, that really helps. And then second to that, they would look at EDAKE. So if you don't have either of these, if you are, for example, if you have the PLAB exam and you've completed PLAB, it's not to say that you cannot get a job in the UK. I would say it might be a little bit harder to make your CV stand out in front of a lot of other doctors that do have maybe EDAKE or FRCA. But I would say, I wouldn't say stop applying. I would say it's definitely worth still applying, but maybe work towards building up and maybe completing an additional examination. A lot of the times as well, it will come down to your clinical experience being suitable for the role that you're applying. So if someone has, European Diploma of Anaesthesia and Intensive Care, and they're applying for a role that has a lot of, paediatrics anaesthesia cover, but they've never really done paediatrics anaesthesia, you don't have European Diploma of Anaesthesia and Intensive Care, but you've been working specifically in a children's hospital for the last 5 years, that you would still have a better chance of getting the role than them. It does, for the most part, come down to your clinical suitability to the role. But yeah, I will be honest in saying that FRCA and EDAKE does catch the eye of the examiners when they're quickly reviewing the CVs.
Oh my goodness, we're getting a lot more questions. But what I'm thinking is, because we have been on here an hour, and I'm sure that our faces are probably boring some of you, we can comment answers to those of you that haven't had answers. I can see some questions from Shamim. Do you want to do one more?
We can try and get this one out of the way.
One more, and then that's it. But we will message every single one of you that have commented, and if you have any more questions, please do reach out to us, because it would be really nice to speak to some of you on the phone or via email. So please do pop us a message and get in touch. You are not bothering us, you're making our day. But the last question from Dr. Shamim Korsar. I have done with MRCP and EDAKE. Congratulations, that's very impressive. With 5 years of working as a consultant in medical and surgical ICUs at consultant level, how many years would it take to work as a consultant intensivist in the UK?
I mean, it again, like we were saying earlier and answering, I can't remember the name of the person that asked the question, sorry about that, but there was a question about sort of, did you have enough experience to work as a consultant? Yes and no, depending on what hospital you're applying for. It sounds like, I will be honest, with MRCP and the European Diploma of Intensive Care, it will put you in very good stead. I would say that would put you above most of the people applying or anyone reaching out. It's two very good qualifications. I would say I would go out on a limb and say probably the two best qualifications to have if you're applying for ICU consultant roles. So certainly, I think you probably can work as a consultant in the UK.
It's just whether you want to, really. It's just whether you want to.
Depends on what your long-term goals are. It depends on which hospitals you're looking at, which areas you're looking at. I mean, it might be worth having, again, like some of the other people that have asked some questions, if you want to have a bit of a conversation, a little bit more detail with us, please feel free to contact us through the website, give us a call, drop us an email, and we will give you some time and speak with you specifically about your situation. We can take a look at your CV and discuss things in a bit more detail. Like for yourself, Dr. Korsar, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly again, one of us will be happy to have a chat with you and discuss that in a bit more detail. I'm just conscious we haven't got much time.
No, we've done an hour. Yeah. We've done an hour, and again, apologies that we were 10 minutes late to our own live. Another apology for the fact that we had to finish Facebook and rejoin. Another apology that Tyler had to take an urgent call. But we made it, and I really hope that it was useful. I feel like we should do this again more regularly, but we will be on time to the next one. please do contact us. We're going to get back to all of you. But thank you so much for joining. This was fun.
Yeah. Thank you very much, guys. I hope it's been helpful.
Hope so.
Yeah, like Alice said, we'll get back to all the questions that we haven't answered through messages. And again, please feel free to reach out to us. If anyone's got any more questions or wants to discuss any personal situations or job searches in the UK, just give us a call.
Ta-da!
Bye-bye. How do we close these?
Thank you. Bye.